Good morning, everyone. We're here today to mark a milestone in Illinois' journey to make our classrooms more inclusive and celebrate the voices who made it possible along the way. I'd like to recognize Senator Cristina Pacione-Zayas and Representative Teresa Ma, whose work leaves a lasting legacy on Illinois' education system as we strive to lift up all of our students. I'd also like to thank advocates, including Newsella, Access Living, Chicago Public Schools, the Blind Service Association, and parents like Tom Luftus for their work to support and meet the needs of students all across the state of Illinois. We need voices like yours to continue the fight for more equitable education standards in Illinois. This new law makes Illinois a national leader in protecting students with disabilities from being left behind by digital learning platforms. By next August, every public and private K-12 school in Illinois must ensure that online curriculum meets the leading standard for web content accessibility so that all students can use the tools that bring the whole world into their classrooms. This legislation truly meets the moment when it comes to giving our students the most fulfilling education possible. Prior to the pandemic, we had some schools where every student had a tablet and some schools with a paper and pencil curriculum. And in March 2020, every single one of them had to navigate their way to the finish line of online learning, creating an entirely new classroom infrastructure in the middle of an already traumatic moment for students and for their families. My administration's efforts to close the digital divide in our schools long predates the pandemic. Through our Connect Illinois program, we are investing $400 million into improving our state's broadband accessibility. We are investing that money to make sure that none of our learners are left behind. And with the help of nonprofit agencies, we distributed devices to kids who didn't have one. We're doubling down on those efforts with our COVID relief dollars, helping districts revitalize learning and teaching for students and educators through counseling, tutoring, mental health services, and of course, plugging students into the digital universe. I'm very proud to mark another achievement as we pave the way for an education system that meets the challenges of the 21st century and do so alongside so many of the voices who shape a better Illinois for our learners every single day. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to one such leader, and that's Representative Teresa Ma. Representative?
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here, and first of all, I want to thank Governor Pritzker for making this celebration possible. Thank you so much for signing HB 26 into law. It means so much to so many families. I'm extremely proud to have been the House sponsor for this bill. I want to thank all the advocates as well, since very little of our work is possible without you. HB 26 makes Illinois a leader in this arena of educational access for people with disabilities. With this legislation, we're setting an industry standard for accessibility at a time when the use of online curricula has become increasingly prevalent. We saw, especially during the course of this pandemic, how much we have come to rely on remote access and digital platforms for learning. It was heartening to know that there were companies, notably Newsella, that already met this standard. So it made sense to set the same standard for all curriculum providers. To me, this is the core of the work that we do, enacting policy changes that improves people's lives. I'm especially proud to have been involved with this legislation because it brings together a number of issues that I care deeply about: access to education, as well as equity for people with disabilities, and enacting thoughtful, forward-thinking policies that set the standard that we should all follow, things that ultimately improve people's lives. Again, I want to thank everyone for your efforts in bringing this legislation forward and your commitment to this effort overall. This is not the end of our work together, but just the beginning. And I congratulate all of you for this accomplishment, and I look forward to working together in the future and more wins and forward-thinking policies as we move forward. Thank you so much, and now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Senator Pacion-Zayas, to the podium. Thank you.
Good morning. I wish I had a step. So really excited to be here because the policy making that I like to bring forth is really centered on a handful of core principles. And two of them I see really centered in this particular work. The first is equitable access, to ensure that our online platforms are able to reach every single learner, irrespective of if they have any developmental disabilities or delays, you're using an individualized education plan, or just plainly learn differently. The second area is radical inclusion. This is another piece for me that's very important when we center the lived experiences, when we take perspective of how different children are shaped by the environments that they come into and where they learn and how they learn, and the fact that we are opening up this particular access. We know that in the state of Illinois, about 18% of students have individualized education plans. And what this particular legislation does is create the space so that third-party vendors that are partnering with our school districts meet a particular standard with respect to access. Whether that means that we need modifications because there are auditory learning disabilities, visual learning disabilities, cognitive, but this is also based on a principle of universal design. When we center our work around those that have been historically marginalized or those who have had limited access, and now they're able to gain that access by designing our curriculum, by designing the access points with them starting first, everyone wins. So as an educator, as an advocate, as a parent of public school students, this is a dream piece of legislation. It was a no-brainer when Representative Ma brought it my way, as well as Nuzella and Access Living, and it is truly my honor to be a part of this significant legislation in our state. Thank you. And now I'd like to ask Tom Leftis to join us.
Thank you. Good morning. During the day, I am proud to represent the people of the state of Illinois as an assistant state's attorney. But I also am a parent, and I'm visually impaired, and I represent people with disabilities, and more specifically, my interest, someone who is visually impaired. I am a parent. Now, imagine a world that is not designed for you. Imagine a world that you can't read your labels for your food. You can't see a street sign. Well, imagine employment. Well, how do you get there? It's through education. And that's where I come in. When I started, I was reading books on tape. I might have had 15 cassettes trying to figure out where that cassette was. Well, towards the end, at my law school time, I had ebooks. What a godsend. It was great. It was phenomenal. I could just have one screen reader just streaming. Well, technology advanced, and now it's available to everyone, right? Not so much, because what about when your screen reader won't read the heading, or it won't read that body of text? What do? Well, you don't even know it's there. This legislation is there to say, hey, there is a group of people out there that can't even get the information to move themselves forward. How do you get someone that can't see interested in learning if everything is a struggle. 70% of the visually impaired are unemployed or underemployed. I am very hopeful and very thankful to all of the supporters of this, the governor, everyone out there that pushed this forward, because this is absolutely needed. When I'm trying to help my little guy with homework and he's like, okay, well, it's right there. Well, my screen reader's not quite getting it. That's a real example of what I experience on a daily basis when I'm trying to help him. How about the kids who haven't quite got the idea that learning is a phenomenal thing that can push you forward, that can help you get employed? I represent a small group of people, and there's a lot of people that might simply walk by us, not even with the guilt or shame that they ignored us. Well, we were finally heard, and I applaud everyone that supported this, and I thank you all. I truly appreciate it on behalf of the visually impaired community. I'd like to turn it over to Tyler Overstreet. Thank you.
Good morning. I'd like to start off on behalf of Newsella and as a former Illinois educator, thanking Governor Pritzker for having this event today and bringing a much-needed spotlight to the issue of accessibility for our students. I'd also like to thank Representative Ma and Senator Pacion Zayas for championing this legislation unanimously, which I think in the world that we live in today is something that's really unheard of, so we're really excited about that. At Newsella, as an educational vendor, our mission is to provide students and teachers with accessible and equitable resources. We want to make sure that all students have access to digital learning materials that are engaging and empower them in the learning process. We know that roughly 13% of students across the country receive services for disabilities. That's hundreds of thousands of students every day that could be going to school and accessing digital resources that they can't actually access. And with this issue, it's only been put underneath a magnifying glass for the past 2 years with the pandemic and push to remote learning. We know that districts are actively looking to solve issues around Wi-Fi and just providing students with devices, but we know the challenges with devices don't stop there. That once a student has a device, there's all these hidden barriers that are built into learning resources. They can range from not being able to use a screen reader or not being able to use a keyboard to navigate. And that's something that at Newsella we're setting forth to really bring those resources to light and help make sure that students can access these resources, as Tom mentioned, with just even the ability to see and actually access the resources. So with that, we're thankful that Illinois is leading the way with this bill to help students regardless of their abilities. Pushing for WCAG compliance is a form of disability justice, and that is a mission that Newsella is committed to supporting. So with that, over the past year, we've actually gone through different ways of making sure that our site is 100% WCAG accessible for all students in order to better serve the over 1 million students who are actually accessing our platform. So once again, I just want to thank the governor for having us here today. As a former government teacher, this is like dream come true kind of world for me, being here today and working with you. We know that equality is an ongoing issue, and that this bill is a step in the right direction for all of us. So thank you once again, and the governor will now take some questions.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Happy to take questions from members of the media.
I didn't know if anybody had any on topic. Maybe if we could then. We're looking for a COVID update. What do you see? What are the numbers? Do you think we've peaked? Why don't we start with that?
As you know, a few days strung together in a row could give you hope, but not necessarily tell you what the trend is. And so we're watching these numbers closely. Certainly over the last few days, when put together and averaged, it seems like things are flattening, and that's a really good piece of news for all of us. And so I'm watching closely, and we'll watch the numbers over the next few days to see whether we can string together a week and 2 weeks of numbers, not just flattening, but heading down. And then, we'll take action certainly as we see things improving.
What do you mean take action, like
There are lots of options, certainly, and again, I want to make sure that we're heading in the right direction before we might do anything that might tend to increase the number of cases.
So at the same time, there are 26 schools that have
Yeah.
had outbreaks.
Yep.
And when it comes to sports, IHSA does not have a uniform policy for sports, leaving it up to local. It does cause some confusion. You know, if you could maybe play down in Effingham, but you can't play in Aurora. Would that be a better idea, to have a uniform policy?
We've tried hard to have uniform policies and also leave some decision-making here to local school districts. And so I know it's challenging. Listen, it's challenging leading at the top of state government. It's challenging when you're a state representative or a state senator to answer all the questions that people want, to make sure that people are following the policies that are best for their communities. So, you know, we're all working together, and certainly as we go, trying to figure out what adjustments might need to be made.
So we have 26 schools, but there's 4,300 schools in this state, people should know. And Dr. Wardy said yesterday that more kids are testing positive because we're actually testing healthy kids, or just kids, more than we ever have before that are at school. So what are the metrics to have a school go to remote learning? And is it up to each school or each superintendent?
No. So we have, as you know, statewide mask policy for all schools. But you talk about 26 schools. Those are just the ones that have reported an outbreak. Remember, an outbreak is one in which there are 5 or more kids or people at that school who have tested positive. And then, of course, there are many people who end up being quarantined or isolated as a result of their exposure to those COVID positives. So there's it's 5 or more, 5 or more. 26 schools is just those that have as yet reported. But I can tell you that you could pick up a newspaper and read about some schools that haven't yet been reported as part of the IDPH numbers, but then in fact have an outbreak of one sort or another. So we're watching all of that very closely. I know you want to diminish the numbers and make it seem like it's not a big deal, but the truth is that as kids are getting back to school, and some are just back in school, this is their first week, and it's important for us to monitor very closely as they're interacting with one another, and we're talking about teachers and superintendents and administrators and other people that work in schools, the parents that interact with the school, not to mention the kids themselves that we're trying to protect. So we'll keep reporting on those numbers as we get them.
Do you think this is just the beginning of a trend? Are we going to see a whole slew with more schools going? You know, travel just kicked off this week.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, truthfully, the more people interact with one another who have COVID, where there may be a higher positivity rate or just a higher number of cases, the more likely you are to see greater numbers of cases coming. But again, mask wearing does an awful lot to curb the spread, and of course, getting vaccinated is perhaps the most important thing to keep people safe.
So the United Center has announced today you need a vaccine, you need to show proof or negative test. Do you believe restaurants and gyms should go that route as they are already doing so in New York City?
That certainly, if they choose to do that, I think that would be a very positive thing for bringing down the numbers. That's not something that we're currently looking at doing, but again, we're watching these numbers closely. If we see them heading upward, and if the trajectory, an angle of ascent of cases increases, then we would need to look at the menu of options to try to bring those numbers down.
Governor, about the maps, there was an opinion piece in the Washington Post this morning that called Illinois maps appalling gerrymandering. Do you intend to sign, or do you intend to veto these maps?
I read the piece that you're thinking of in the Washington Post written by a right-wing commentator. I have not reviewed the details of the maps. They haven't even been sent to me yet. And you know what my principles are around maps, which are really around diversity of representation for the diverse state that we have.
We'll do one more.
I mean, if I can just follow up, there were 12 Republicans who were grouped into, remapping, 12 of them pitted against one another. Does that concern about diversity also apply to Republicans and not just blacks or Hispanics? It seems like, they're just targeting to eliminate Republican districts.
It isn't about that. It isn't about party affiliation. It really is about diversity of our state and the representation that people who sometimes haven't been represented all that well over decades should now be represented in a state as diverse as ours.
One more, Mary Ann. What's the availability of hospital beds and ICU beds in the state of Illinois?
You can find all that information on the IDPH
We're heading
website.
in the right direction.
Well, if you look, you have to look at a number of numbers here to make conclusions. One of the very important ones is how many new people are entering hospitals each day? How many, in other words, is that number going up or down? Right now, it's about flat, okay, if you look over the last, I don't know, 5 to 7 days. Again, I would have to look at the numbers to give you an exact number of days. But that is an important number to look at. It's also an important number to look at the number of cases that we're seeing. Are those cases going up? We know that following cases come hospitalizations, come ICU beds, and so on. Thank God for vaccines, because the number of people who enter the hospital as a result of, the case numbers going up is now diminished as compared to the case volume. But it's still increasing, or at least what I would say to you is if you look at all the surrounding states, if you look at Kentucky in particular, and now we're seeing it in Indiana, the numbers are going up. I mean, we're not immune. There's no, invisible barrier that keeps COVID-19 on the other side of a border. So one of the things that I've talked to a number of doctors about is what seems to be a kind of northerly movement of these cases. Southern Illinois being very much on the same latitude as Kentucky being overwhelmed, and the governor of Kentucky yesterday was talking about, how very, very difficult their situation is. They really are nearly out of beds across the state. And so, I think about that northerly movement and the fact that we already have quite a number of cases in Chicago, in the Cook County suburbs, in the Collar counties, and then, of course, across the central and northern Illinois. I'm concerned about that northerly movement of cases. Again, I don't know whether it will continue that pattern, but it concerns me.
This is the last one.
Abortion law and the implications for Illinois.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I am, frankly, deeply concerned about the anti-abortion legislation that was passed and signed in Texas, and that the Supreme Court has now said they will not hear or overturn. And first, I would say shame on those Texas lawmakers for taking away not just women's rights, but women's health. Banning abortion does not keep women safe. And I am very concerned and focused on making sure that here in Illinois, we are a beacon of hope for women who need reproductive health. And we're seeing that people in states like Missouri have had to come across the border in order to just protect their own rights, to see a doctor, for goodness sakes. And so I'm proud of our state, and I'm deeply concerned about what may be happening across the country and what the Supreme Court may do.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.